A quote from a fellow preacher. To be a preacher requires two apparently contradictory qualities: confidence and humility. You can cast your vote in favor of one or other of us later. That's from Timothy Ratcliffe. And I was thinking about today's sermon earlier in the week, and I was thinking about Timothy because I first met him back in 1986. My sister had just died very suddenly, and a friend of mine was dying of AIDS. And so I came across a notice about a conference being held in a place called Spode in the Midlands. And so I went to the conference, and so there Timothy, he was prior of the community in Oxford, and he dared to show the face of Christ. He dared to show the church dealing with life as it happens, with all its difficulties, not shunning away, but facing and wondering and asking, what can we do? I also remember a letter that he quoted. It was from a former Archbishop of San Francisco, John Quinn. The most beautiful pastoral letter I'd ever read at the time, and I'm not sure I've seen one more pastoral ever since. Talking with compassion. And John Quinn, the bishop of that archdiocese, remember there was such fear and such anxiety. And so John Quinn would not receive the chalice from the altar first. It would go to the people, and Peter would be the last one to receive, because we know the terrible things that fear can do. I think is he still alive? Do you know? Is John Quinn still alive? No. He was certainly alive about 10 years ago because he was here in Houston. But I'm not sure about since. And I say that because the message that we preach in the name of Jesus is the one who we heard in a second reading shares our infirmities. What a wonderful model for priest. And just by chance, yesterday I received in the mail a copy of the Dominican, I'm not sure how often a magazine comes out, it was the first time they've sent it to me. But then I was reading about the Dominicans in Britain that Timothy had written. And he says, the gospel is universal, but all preaching seeks to bring the faith to birth in particular cultures, both embracing and challenging them. Embracing and challenging. And then he goes on to say what sort of preachers the Dominicans have been in Britain. And he gave a lovely quote from one of the leaders of that community in Oxford. He was trying to reassure a mother whose son was entering the Dominicans, and I presume she wasn't particularly happy about it. He describes the characteristics of the new member: having courage and happy laughter, who sets people's hearts on fire. A happy heart for a preacher. Well, there's something to be modelled on Larry. But he also goes on quoting other Dominicans who have been in Britain over the last 800 years, because they were in my mind and heart of late, because I was following a group of them that were traveling from where the first Dominican landed, and they're crossing Britain. These young men, 800 years later, giving themselves to Christ. And one of the greats who translated Aquinas defines theology as the overspill of divine faith into all levels of human reasonableness, including its wit, humor, poetic imagination, sense of analogy, power of coordination, openness to be taught, and searching for reasons why, when, how, and what is all this about. So it's not someone who just comes with answers, who puts you in your place and tells you what you ought to do, but someone who wants to listen to your story and listen together for what it is that God is calling us to do. And Timothy goes on at great length in this lengthy article to talk about the need not to be so dogmatic, but the need to be open. And there was one man who was from France, and he was confounded by these men in Oxford. He said, you sing the liturgy in Latin, you say the office in Latin, you go off and protest against nuclear disarmament. You stand with the poor. You work with those who are suffering from HIV and AIDS. And so the Dominicans certainly taught me, and continue to teach me, how we have to take away from the example of Dominic the ability to listen. He spent all night with someone who did not believe in the God of Jesus Christ, and they spent all night in dialogue. And they surely couldn't have spent it saying, I'm sorry, Merle, you're wrong. And you say, no, no, Phil, you're wrong. And so Timothy says, keep asking the hard questions. Listen to the responses you get from people. And that's why I believe the Dominicans survived and are doing really quite well in Britain, despite the Black Plague that came soon after they arrived, despite World War I and II, and despite the difficulties of the 1960s, because they stand by a God who comes very close to his people, a God who suffered for our infirmities. And so we hopefully suffer with those from whichever direction they come, whichever tendency they have in terms of theology or politics. But listen, work with, and challenge, always in the name of the one who is merciful and compassionate. Please like, subscribe, or comment below.